So the grand finale, until next year, I will take no bit of time before passing over the throne to our Director of Science for the Alabama Water Institute. Director of Science for the Alabama Water Institute, Executive Director of CIROH, which is our Cooperative Institute for Research to Operations in Hydrology, which he can tell you a little bit more about what that is, and a Professor of Civil Engineering here at UA. And why don't we can, at the end of today, we'll give him a fourth title. We'll take votes on a new title, whether it's Czar of Water or something else, but ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Steve Burian.
Thank you, Zach. Wonderful introduction. That's amazing. Great to be here with you all. And I think as I was invited to do this, I was excited to come and join you all. And the format, I'm a professor, so I've been in regular classrooms, and I've taught regular students for a long time. And I've taught a wide range of different types of people. I don't think this is teaching. I think this is more just a conversation or something else that is going to hopefully have some questions from you. And so if you have questions about CIROH, whatever we call it, if you have questions about many titles, if you want to brainstorm the titles, I'm happy to do all that. The focus area, it's the world of water, and my area that I'm going to be focusing on today is cities and urban water, and specifically how do we manage water in cities, and what are the challenges and the I think opportunities and interesting solutions. And so I'll highlight a lot of these things along the way throughout the discussion today. I have some slides, of course, to keep us going. So a little bit about me. I don't think I'm looking around for familiar faces. I see one back there. Hi, Zach. I know you. And I just met you yesterday. And then there's Brock. Hi, Brock, and hello, everyone out there in video land. But I don't think I recognize anyone else. I've been here for about 2 years, almost exactly. I moved here in 2021. But I had been here before. I got a master's and my PhD here at the University of Alabama, and at that point I was studying urban water and stormwater management and things like that around this area. And there was a long history of great professors that for 50 years have been working in urban water in Alabama and Tuscaloosa, and they have a long history here. And so some of the things that you'll see in what I'm going to show are pulling back from some of those things that I worked on like 30 years ago. Still very relevant today. Starting it off with a little question. So how many of you interacted over the last weekend with an urban stream? Did anyone interact with an urban stream? Oh, we did? Oh, well, Zach, you don't count. But no, Zach, I'll be interested for your story. So what did you interact with? We got name tags, nice.
Yeah, I'm
Ray.
7 Mile Creek, I believe, which is drains into the Black Warrior.
Yeah. Is that in Birmingham?
No, it's here.
Oh, I know of a 2 Mile Creek. Is there a 7 Mile Creek too? There is a 7 Mile Creek.
No, the 8 Mile.
There's a lot of 8 Mile creeks, yeah. So that's great. So what did you do? Did you just visit it or?
Just walking along.
Yeah. What did you do?
I went in the lazy river at Alabama Splash.
That's one river I don't have in my thing. So yeah.
Well,
Richard.
I haven't interacted with it in the last week, but about 400 feet away from here is an urban stream that goes beneath the School of Music.
Oh.
And you can only become aware of it if you take the elevator down to the basement when you hear the water rushing.
Oh, interesting.
Which is, kind of scary the first time.
Yeah. So what do you know what the name of that creek is? See, there's a lot of...
It's been covered over for decades.
Yeah.
It was not exposed when the school was built. I'm sure the engineers and architects were aware of it, at least I hope so. But it's there, and you go down the elevator to the basement below the concert hall, and it's really a presence.
Yeah. So when you're looking for your Zen moment, you can go down into there and just, oh, the rushing waters of the hidden stream somewhere.
Yeah.
So that's the point is generally when you talk about urban water and streams and cities, people are like, I don't know. I don't know where they're at, what they are. Maybe I kind of heard something that sounded like water going underneath a building. Maybe you can find a walkway that has been designed into access to that particular area. But generally, engineers through the many years were focused on covering them up and hiding them. And so part of what I'm going to focus on is how there is different perspectives through history that have led to the current state that we have and how that will change through into the future. So we had some interaction. Let's try a little quiz. So this is going to be a fun one. Now this is going to get us focused on urban water and some of the topics that we'll cover throughout the day. This is a difficult question, so I started off just in the challenge. How many miles of storm sewers? How many miles of storm sewers are there in the U.S.?
Feel free to use the
Oh, yeah, we got prizes. Well, I don't want to, yeah. Well, let's see. I don't think anyone's going to be able to get this one, so the prize is that this is going to be a gold watch. If you can answer that question, you get a gold watch.
575 million miles.
Oh, now that's a great number. Way off, but a good guess, Thank you for participating. It's way off. It's lower than that. It's 3.5 million miles. So it's a huge number. 3.5 million miles of storm sewers in the U.S. that are documented. Now there's many others that are under buildings or built in 1833 that no one knows about. And so they think that this number is probably 2 or 3 times as large. So you could use roughly 10 million miles of storm sewers in the U.S., which is serving a lot of great functions for cities.
Do you consider ditches?
Do you consider ditches? No, it depends. So this gets into a question of, very fun for us engineers is what do we call things? And so it depends on what the purpose of that ditch is. It could be a storm drain. It could be something else. It could be an irrigation canal. It could just be a waterway that is not serving any of those purposes, so it wouldn't be classified as a storm drain. So this 3.5 million comes from EPA and part of their system of monitoring and regulating those storm drains, and they have a full database of all the storm drains in the U.S. that they have documented. How many watersheds is the city of Birmingham located within? Now this gets more local, and we're going to go local even more on the next one. How many watersheds?
What is a watershed?
Oh, what's a watershed? This is the world of water. I'm like the last talk, and no one's talked about what a watershed is. Interesting.
I missed a few.
Oh, okay. No, but we'll recap it. Who knows what a watershed is?
Water drains.
Exactly. It's the perimeter of an area, and all the water within that perimeter drains to a waterway or water body. So if we say the Black Warrior watershed, it would be the area of land of which all of the water that falls on all the rainfall or sprinklers or other things that go onto that land would drain to the Black Warrior River. That would be the Black Warrior watershed. So in this case, we're talking about the number of watersheds that would be the area of Birmingham, those watersheds that are covering that particular area. How many would you guess?
I guess 3.
3, close, 6. Oh, but between those two,
Oh, 5.
5. Yeah. It's 5. It's 5. And here's another one of these. There's 5. Oops. Oh, that's magic. How did I do that? Oh, nice. 5 Mile Creek. So we had 7 Mile Creek, 8 Mile Creek, 2 Mile Creek. It was 2 Mile Creek. Okay, yeah. That's very close. 5 Mile Creek is in Birmingham. Village Creek, Valley Creek, Shades Creek, and Cahaba River. How many have heard of any of these? Okay, which one? Cahaba. How about the others? 5 Miles, Sage. Okay, so we got some. Let's keep on rolling. Oh wait, we had a 5. We had a 5, so we had a winner. Yeah, you get a. I can't forget about the grand prizes here. Yeah, this is
My favorite.
Oh, very nice. Yes, you're very welcome. Thanks to Zach. So now, what's the average annual rainfall amount in the city of Tuscaloosa?
42 inches.
Close.
50.
What did he say?
He said 40 to 50.
50.
54.
I'm going to give away Zach's bucks, no matter what. 52, very good. Yes, okay. It is 52 point. We could have kept on going, but that was getting a little low. 52.6 inches. So you were all in the ballpark, which was great.
53, so I should get one.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. I'll get you on the next one. So it's 50. It's 52. And so you're all in the ballpark, which is great because that means that you pay attention that there's a lot of rain. Relative to the rest of the country, that's one of the higher, that's on the upper 10% of all states in the country. But that's a lot of rain, and we got a few creeks. Now let's get into one more. How many miles of sanitary sewer are in the city of Tuscaloosa? No one's going to get this one. A guess from you today?
Okay, 15, I don't know.
15 million? That's not, yeah. 15 million or 15 miles?
I was saying 15.
Okay. No one's going to get this one. 566 miles of sewers in the city of Tuscaloosa. So look at the magnitudes now of what we're talking about. 3.5 million miles of storm sewers. Sanitary sewers are different, so I'm introducing some terms. We'll get to those later on as we talk about the infrastructure and start defining things, what's a storm drain, what's a sewer, and so on. But there's 566 miles of these things in just the city of Tuscaloosa. It's a lot of stuff. So now let's go to the last question. What are the major water bodies, waterways in the city limits of Tuscaloosa?
Lake.
We got Black Warrior, Lake Tuscaloosa. That's two. There's North River. I don't think so, because I think that is going to be outside of Tuscaloosa. At least I'm using the data from the city of Tuscaloosa, so this is the waterways they claim, and they did not have the North River.
Forest Lake?
No, this is for waterways or major. So Forest Lake is not considered a major, I guess. They got a lot of ducks, but
Hurricane Creek, does it drain into Tuscaloosa?
it does not. No, but that's a good guess. It's very near. When I looked at the boundaries, I thought the same thing. I was like, well, that's very close. And I looked at it and I was like, well, okay,
We
maybe.
said Lake Tuscaloosa?
We did say Lake Tuscaloosa, so we're still missing 4 creeks. These are
Is there a Hurricane Creek?
Hurricane Creek was guessed, and that's right outside the boundary, but it's very close. So you can consider it's in the Tuscaloosa area. So let's look at what we have. This is from the Tuscaloosa website, so if it's wrong, blame them. I just took it straight from them. But the city of Tuscaloosa claims that within their city limits, they have Lake Tuscaloosa, Black Warrior, which you all got, Cribbs Mill Creek, Cypress Creek, Cottondale Creek, Rum Creek, and Moody Swamp. Have you ever heard of any of those? Moody Swamp? Okay. Yeah, there's a road over that way.
That area floods quite a bit.
Yeah. Okay, now we're catching on. These are all areas where you're like, okay, we've got to have some things to talk about. But this is, you can go to the Google map and find all these places. They're not easy to find. They're even harder to get to. And so 2 Mile is on the other side of the river, and so that would technically be 2 miles up here somewhere. Whoops. I forget it. 2 miles up here, and then let's see, the Cypress or Cribbs Mill runs through basically the center of town, traverses along there. Cottondale Creek is over here. We're expecting Cottondale. You can see Hurricane Creek is right over here, just outside the boundaries. And then you have Rum Creek and Cypress are down over here. And then Moody Swamp is over here, I think. And those are the main watersheds that are in Tuscaloosa, the major waterways and water bodies. Okay, so in this lesson, what I'm going to be doing is focusing on these 3 things. With that little background, that was kind of setting the stage, getting us warmed up and so on. Defining the urban stream life cycle, urban stream syndrome, explain how urban streams are at the center of urban water infrastructure systems and getting into the engineering side, and then describing green infrastructure solutions. And these are things that started back when I was in graduate school and became a thing in the 90s, and then now has become sort of the standard and is looking to go forward. And so that's going to be the types of things, and along the way I'll have many types of questions. So the urban stream life cycle. If I asked you what is the progression of an urban stream through steps, and there's 4 steps that I'm going to show, what do you think those 4 steps would be for an urban stream?
First rain.
The starting point.
Well, what do you think an urban stream looked like before there was a city? Let's start with that. What did it look like before a city was there?
You would have to have like major source of the water, like a spring or?
It has something that's giving its water, and it's just a natural looking area. As the city starts to grow, what does that stream start to look like? So as we start to look at the life cycle, it's natural, and then what happens? They confine it, and then what happens? Polluted, and then what happens? We got one more stage, and you experienced it. It covered it over. Okay, that's the life cycle. Let's look and see what. So that's that's kind of there. Now we're starting to constrain it, and now we're starting to really constrain it. There's very little water in it, and then we just say, well, the heck, it was covered all up. That's the life cycle. Now that's the life cycle that had progressed from before cities and through most of the last 200 years. And then we have these type of situations and now the life cycle is being reversed at great cost, but great projects for engineers to work on is first it was engineers that were doing all this, and then now the engineers are going in the reverse. So you have the life cycle at various stages going either towards being covered up or towards opening up. And that going in one direction or the other, and that's happening in all cities and streams around the world. Now there's this thing called urban stream syndrome, which was a name that's catchy name given to the blight of urban streams and the pollution and so on that has come up. And these are the various things that happen: channel modifications, encroachments, culverts and other things, spills, accidents, infrastructure, stormwater drainage entering in, and people, of course, doing bad things. That's fake, but those are bad things. Caught that little one in the act of actually doing some dumping of something. But all these things cause problems.
Steve, can I ask a trivia question to the group?
Yeah.
I did my master's in Pennsylvania. What is the number one thing spilled into streams and creeks and water bodies in the state of Pennsylvania?
Motor oil.
What's the main thing?
Yeah.
I would say gasoline.
Toxic waste is quite a bit.
The answer is milk.
Oh,
Because it's such a dairy state, and you get overturned milk-carrying trucks that spill into streams, and then the milk curdles in the stream.
Zach gets the bug. He answered his own question. That's cheating. Well, congratulations. Zach answering his own question. Very good.
We weren't going to get there.
Yeah, we got to stop him. Okay, so what happens is, so here's from a hydrology standpoint. Yeah, you watershed, we got watershed down. Now this is a hydrograph. Have we covered hydrograph for the world of water? This is the world of water. Hydrograph is, who knows what a hydrograph is? Does anyone know what a hydrograph is?
I guess it's a graph of water flow.
That's right. Very good. Now that deserves a mug. Take that one from Zach. So it is a graph of the flow of water over time at a particular point in a location. So you consider the stream gauges is the classic one where you'd see a hydrograph. And so we got the hydrograph showing the flow of water over this time, and this is representative of what happens when you do the urban stream life cycle. Over time, things become, this is the dark line is the original line that you would have. You have a smaller peak flow, a gradual recession. It's relatively manageable. After you urbanize it and the urban stream syndrome takes place, you end up with this huge peak, the higher, more rapid peak discharge, and that happens. And then you have a less flow at this time. It goes much lower. Both of those are problems. This one's a problem for what? What happens when you have this? Floods. What happens down over here? It's drought, bad water, not enough water for fish or other types of wildlife. And so the urban stream effects of development cause those major problems. And of course, then you got all the other types of problems associated with the interface of urban streams and urban waterways and infrastructure systems. You have all types of erosion. You have different types of pollution, public health problems, different types of biological impacts and things like that. So that's all parts of the urban stream syndrome and the consequences. Questions so far? You can ask me questions too. And you don't have to. I won't get a mug, so if I answer it right, I don't get a mug.
This is kind of amazing because I've seen this in Mexico City
Mm-hmm.
over the last 60 years, but I never thought of it as a plottable series of steps, you know, as a predictable sequence, I guess.
It's a predictable sequence, and then also something that you can pay attention to try to prevent. So the objective of the engineers is we now understand this progression in this cycle, and not only in this respect and in this respect, but so we design the systems to be able to try to prevent those effects. And so that's all the storm drains that we saw earlier, that's all the sewers that we saw earlier, or we talked about earlier, the miles and miles of stuff. They're all trying to mitigate these type of impacts. Okay. So, what's the big thing that I have not mentioned at all, that we haven't really talked about? The big problem facing us all. Climate change. There we go. Nancy gets a mug. I'm going too fast with mugs now. Zach, we need more mugs. I've already given them all away.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Is this mic working? Okay, good. I can't really hear it. But it looks like everyone's here. So so we mentioned climate change, right? So let's talk for a few minutes about how all of those other things are the regular stuff, and then we add climate change type stuff on top of it. So let's just see what types of things we have and how it relates to what we were talking about before in terms of all those other effects. So just focusing on Alabama, there's a lot of national studies, and this one shows that precipitation, now this is not climate change, this is observations, what we've seen over the last century. And if you compare the first 50 years of the 20th century, which would have been 1900 to 1950, to the more recent period, you end up with, in Alabama, precipitation has increased modestly, 5 to 10%, a small amount of increase of precipitation compared to the first half of the 20th century. So precipitation is increasing. But even though rainfall is projected to increase into the future, just thinking of how this will affect the streams, the overall amount that is recharging groundwater is likely to decrease. If we get more rainfall coming in, but there's less going into the ground, why is that happening? What's happening?
Concrete.
No, that's a good guess, but no. No pavement.
Temperature causes evaporation.
Oh, you already got a mug, but that's a second mug for you. So it is this evaporation and transpiration. So it could be the concrete, it would be storing it there, and then it increases it, but it's the increases in evaporation and transpiration. So even though there may be more precipitation in Alabama, there will be less recharge of the groundwater under that scenario, which leads to problems in base flow in the streams, that lower recession limb of the hydrograph, and overall less impacts to the vegetation ecosystem. Yeah.
Are there any aquifers in Alabama?
Are there what?
Aquifers that are used for drinking water in Alabama?
Yes.
Where are they?
They're all over. I think there's different types of aquifers. Let's talk about the ones that are down in the coastal areas. And so the coastal areas, there's groundwater that's used routinely for drinking water and other municipal purposes. There is, in that area, there's problems not only with recharge, but also the bringing in of salt water into that area, and the pumping up of the water, over pumping leads to bringing in more salt water. And so that area is a major area where they use the subsurface water, and it's problems associated with how you would do that. Okay, let's continue on here. Now, so in drought, so that was the first one was about more precipitation. This is about less precipitation. You can see that this is much more noticeable and much more impactful as there has been more representation of drought conditions in Alabama recently relative to the first half of the 19th century, and that may reflect some of the experiences that we all have, but it seems to be that there is more dry periods now than in the past, and that matches with observations. The biggest thing focused on cities is in this heavy precipitation, and this is where you see substantial increase in heaviest precipitation events. This is looking to the future, and that's going to be 27% in this larger area. It's of course variable across here, so you'll have some that are higher, some are lower, but in general, approximately 20% more flood causing, so heaviest precipitation would be flood causing type of events in cities.
Let me just ask a question that I'm concerned about. Is part of this because you don't have as much of agriculture work going on in Alabama? We'll open the soil back up so it can receive the water. You know, the harder the ground get, the more the water run off it.
Yeah.
So it's part of that, the ground not being what you call broken up so it can absorb the water?
I don't know. That's a good hypothesis. So this would be a good research study that we could do. I would tend to agree with that hypothesis, but I don't know. It's a good thing. So there is part of the problem that you'll be talking about is if you had less recharge of the groundwater. And so what would be causing that? Well, one is going to be potentially increased more drought periods, more evapotranspiration, so you have more water coming out of the ground relative to it going in. That leads to less groundwater, lower quality groundwater. What are some other causes? The changes to the land surface would be the other major cause. Urbanization would be a big one, more concrete on there. And then the other one, like you're talking about, less farmland means that you have other types of urban surfaces or hardened surfaces. Farmland could actually be detrimental to that type of infiltration, depending on how the farmland is created and managed. A lot of farms in the Midwest of the U.S. and other parts of the country have drains and other things that prevent water from going down. They collect it all the water that goes through for the planting and the irrigation, they collect it all, drain it off. Sometimes they reuse it, sometimes they discharge it. That's a whole problem in another type of case if we're outside of cities. But this is definitely plausible hypothesis that there could be something to that. Less plants, less preferential flow paths for water would definitely lead to less recharge of groundwater. But we'd have to test it out. It's a research project. So this means that we're going to have more flood events in cities that are already over-challenged with all the things that we were talking about. The other thing that I'll mention here, that just to round out, when you're talking about streams and cities and storm drains and flooding, there's this thing called CSO. Does anyone know what a CSO is? It's a combined sewer overflow. Sounds nasty. It's a combined sewer overflow. But these type of things, and this is just an example of the different types of infrastructure overloads that would happen. More floods, 27% more floods would mean 27% more overloads of different types of infrastructure systems in the city. I'll talk about combined sewers versus sanitary sewers in a little bit, but this is going to be another impact of if you have more flood level events, you have other types of overloading events. Combined sewer overflows basically means raw sewage discharged into streams. Sanitary sewer overflows are another thing, so if you live in Birmingham, that's a big problem in Birmingham. Sanitary sewer overflows, overloading of the system in wet weather type events. Okay, but measures can be taken. So let's sum up what our challenge or what a syndrome is. We have all this stuff going on, crowded. It's many types of exposures, multiple uses driving the management. So there's a disconnect in how we're going to manage it. And then we have multiple managers with different agendas. All of this leads to a great big challenge in how we engineer, design, and operate those infrastructure systems with the primary purpose of how can we meet the needs of the people in the cities and provide nice recreational areas, nice walkways to go to. Can we get to those areas, and can we also use them functionally for the purposes that we need as in a city? So what are the solutions to all of this? Now, this is not a question I'm going to ask you because it's like, well, maybe you do know. What's the solution? It actually was something I mentioned earlier. Matches the color of Ray's shirt.
Green,
Green?
what do you call it, green building?
Green infrastructure. We got star students here, Zach. Green infrastructure. What was that? Sorry.
I told you we got a great group.
No, it's a great group. I'm really excited. I gotta get another drink of coffee, sorry. Here. But so green infrastructure, this is what we're gonna talk about now. This is the interconnected network of green things in cities that are used by engineers as a way to address all of the challenges that we were just talking about. They're a more universal solution that are started coming into play in about 25, 30 years ago in design, and have been implemented in many types of places across the U.S., including a lot in Tuscaloosa. You have the urban-focused green infrastructure, which you're like, well, I don't see a lot of green in that picture, and that's true because the purpose of it is to provide a green solution. Then, of course, you have different types of green infrastructure that you would have put in place that is providing that service, the engineering function of fighting floods, protecting water quality, providing habitat, et cetera. And all of this is designed and interconnected in a way that it provides an overall function and support for the city area. So the solution, how do we save urban streams that have been buried or channelized? Let's think of reversing that urban stream life cycle. How do we reverse that urban stream life cycle? If we have a stream that has been covered, what can we do? Uncover it. That seems like it might be a logical thing to do. That's really hard to do, and it's really expensive. But you can do it, and it's called daylighting. So this gives you a picture. This is from a site in New York. I forget which city in New York, but somewhere in New York, the stream is somewhere way down in here. And so they basically had to dig it all out, and then you end up with this. Now you can look at it and say, well, which one's better, this or this? It of course depends on your perspective. If you're looking to drive to work, you might say it's that one. If you're looking to have some type of amenity in the city for walking, then it might be this side. But this is called daylighting, this concept of daylighting. There's a famous one that was done, Cheong Ji Chon case study. Anyone speak, what language is that? Chinese. It's close, not Chinese. Korean. Korean, very good. Anyone speak Korean in here? We have such a plethora of expertise, I'm sure, here. No Korean.
There's a Korean class next semester, right?
It might be this afternoon. So this is in Korea, it's in Seoul. Oh, I was going to give another question there. Seoul, Korea, South Korea. This is what the river looked like in 1910. It was kind of there, people all in it and doing stuff in it. And then it got into the 1970s. They said, the heck with this, we're covering it all up and putting in a big highway. And that was very functional. It actually, these type of things, when you look at how South Korea evolved from where they were at in the 1960s to the 1990s, one of the most incredible growths of an economy that the world has ever seen. They went from a very poor country to one of the leading countries in terms of their economic productivity. And a lot of it was because of things like this. They industrialized very rapidly. But that was what they had in 1976 for this big river. It's a huge river. Then in 2008, they decided, let's go ahead and open that sucker up. So try to imagine to do this. This is a major part. Seoul is like 20 million people, something like that, give or take 10 million. It's a huge city and very difficult to figure out how many people are actually there. But you can see this is the same picture. They removed the double-decker highway and opened that river back up. How much do you think that cost? Yes, questions?
I had a question.
Yeah.
And in New York and in South Korea, were they doing that because the underground water was causing problems, or was there a need for more water? I just wonder, why did they decide to do it in New York first of all?
Yeah, no, this is a great question of why. And so it's wrapped up in various reasons, but mostly it is because there's three reasons. One would be of the things you'll see in a second is that the community wants it. They want to have the access. They want to go walk by 2 Mile Creek or 7 Mile Creek or whatever. And there's a lot of interest in this. Two, it's better in terms of urban heat islands and other types of things that we're struggling with right now. Going back to the climate change scenarios, the urban heating is going to be outrageous in big cities like this. And they need amenities like this to be able to combat that. Otherwise, lives are lost. Quite honestly, heat waves cause thousands of deaths when they happen. And so they are going to have to prevent deaths, and this would be one way to do it. This also is a way to protect water quality, and then also a way to, it has more conveyance capacity for floods than what you would have in a normal situation in some cases. Now this particular one, it was an amenity. And the only way, it was a hugely expensive project. It was what there was a presidential election, and one of the candidates was firmly in favor of this. We're going to open up this big river, and it's going to be the jewel of the city. And then there was the other candidate that was against it. And so it was like the people voted, and they voted for the river, basically. And they did it. And it was the most expensive public works project they had ever done by a large fraction. But let's take a look at some of the things that they did. Basically, I mean, you can see this is what it would have been like at ground level. You had the two roadways, lower roadway, upper roadway, and the river was all buried and tunneled underneath it. But they opened it up to this type of fanfare, and it is if you ever go to South Korea and Seoul, this would be a place you would most likely visit. It's a remarkable type of asset right now, where before there was basically nothing there for what it would be like. But it's very interesting. It's an oasis. It's very cool there. It's a hot place, and you go by it. It's a very cool area from this temperature standpoint. But what are some problems that we create? So the engineers they weren't. I'm an engineer myself. They weren't dumb when they covered it up. So with it being uncovered, what's the big problem? What happens when a flood comes? It could flood the buildings around it. What do we do with all these people here?
No, just
Okay, we're taking them back. How do you get people to get out of there if a flood's coming? You know, we barely.
That's the $1 million question.
That's the $1 billion question, yeah. So you have to have people actively go out there and get people out of there. Make sure everyone's out of there when they're going to have a flood coming. There's big sirens that go off. They have all types of rescue gear and equipment, and so there's a lot of concerns about that. This is similar, you know, you look at this, but you go to Las Vegas. It's like they got the same type of setup all over the city because they get huge storms. They happen like 5 times a year, but when they happen, it's a lot of rain, and they have these very tight, confined concrete areas for channels, and they end up with a lot of the same type of safety measures. And so when you do this, you create that situation where you didn't have it before. You have to create like a whole department for flood management, flood warning, flood emergency response. All of that stuff has to be created and deployed. And so you create yourself new problems every time you do something like this. So it's like, oh, it's great, but you have to be able to address the problems that you create. Yes?
All right, just my simple mind here, but so you have all these people, particularly in a place like this part of Korea, you know, with massive amounts of people, and the flooding is coming. Yes, you have to figure out ways to work with the water so that it doesn't harm the people, but you also create more jobs, because now you need people to be able to do that and to come along and help these people get out of that area. So that's.
Yeah, the tourism is incredible. So the people that were around there, they're like, well, this is going to be chaos for like 4 years while they do this, but after the fact, if we can weather that storm, then we've got our property suddenly is very, very valuable because we are right on this amenity. So you got all these type of jobs, economic growth, economic development that would come with it. So it definitely is and that was another criticism of this. It was a big real estate development project because basically it turned an area that was not very valuable to be next to this busy highway to an extremely valuable property next to it, the center of the city and the center of the tourist district. And so you're absolutely right. There's opportunities and challenges associated with it. So it all requires some careful planning, engineering, and management as you go into these type of urban life cycle reversals, urban stream life cycle reversals. Yes?
Well, just looking at this, it reminds me of restricted canyons in the southwestern U.S. in which flash floods appear in a matter of moments. And I can just imagine all of those tables and tents floating down the river along with the people who are.
Yeah, no, it's
Southwest, you don't have anybody in the canyons unless you're dumb enough to stay there.
Yeah, or you don't know.
Yeah,
I mean,
you
don't know. And then here, at least, it's all confined, and someone can run through it. You know, they know it's coming, and they can get people out. In the canyons like that, or other types of flash flood scenarios, in remote areas, there's nothing. You're trapped. But yeah, it requires that planning. So it's all part of when you're thinking about these things, and you go now and you start noticing your urban streams as you come out of this particular session, you can be thinking about, well, there's positives, there's negatives, there's challenges, there's opportunities, there's solutions associated with these types of green infrastructure systems. But that would be one type of green infrastructure system. So how do we restore streams to healthy functioning systems? After we open them up, if we're talking about reversing that urban stream life cycle, now we want to open them up. That's not just enough. We have to do some other things. We have to restore that creek. So we have to try to put in some natural elements, because after you expose it, it's still just concrete. And so you have to be able to rebuild that ecosystem, rebuild the plants, provide something that will be a functioning ecosystem to some level so that it provides some benefits. And so that's called stream restoration. You probably have heard of that. There's been tons of stream restoration projects in this area and in Birmingham, and you'll probably recognize some of that when you start to think about it now. You go, oh yeah, that's what they talked about. The different things, so when you look at this particular creek, first of all, does anyone recognize where this is at? Sometimes people recognize these things. LA, yes. You can always recognize LA. Why do you know that's LA?
Because I've seen pictures of it.
Yeah, you've seen movies of this.
Yeah.
Whenever you see the movies of people driving through the creeks in LA, it's these type of creeks. They're very famous. Las Vegas looks similar. They just haven't had the same type of movies. You haven't seen the pictures. But that's LA.
They're occasionally used for drag races.
Yeah, legal activities, many of them. What would you do to restore this? This is Ballona Creek in Los Angeles. It drains through the heart of the downtown city and into Santa Monica Bay. What would you do to restore this? The mayor of LA comes to you and says, we're going to restore Ballona Creek, which has actually happened. And you have to add some vegetation. But where? How do you get vegetation in that place? Now realize, right along here on both sides, what do you have there? That's houses. Houses are right here. So there's a little pathway here. So this was something back in my history. I worked on this project, and it was actually what happened. The LA mayor was like, it wasn't the same as as running for the president of South Korea, where there's like, we're going to open up the Cheonji River. This was the mayor of LA already there, who was working and trying to do environmental projects, and this was one that they gravitated onto it. And so there was a Friends of Ballona Creek, and all these things erupted, and they tried to figure out, well, how do we restore this? What does this look like during a rain event? Full of water. It's like that.
Or did they try to siphon or get water from some of the more northern areas and get a larger percentage of water coming to LA to do that? Oh.
That's dirty business in that part of the world. Yeah, they already do that. They already have a lot of water that comes to Southern California from the northern parts, and it's not popular with those in the north.
When you first showed the picture, it made me think also of Arizona, because they have this system that goes from one area down to the other. I don't know the whole beginning and ending part of it, but I've seen it and I've worked around it. And the conversation there for a long time was that if you keep watering these areas that weren't supposed to be watered for golf courses, you're going to run out of water. And I had friends that said BS, BS, BS. They didn't believe it at all. Do you know how that system works, and is it working now? Because I haven't been in a while, so I don't know. But.
So you're right. This looks so all across the Southwest, from California to Nevada to Arizona, Texas, West Texas. These type of waterways are present, and that was the standard design, a trapezoid. It's a perfect trapezoidal shape for drainage. It's the very efficient shape for flood conveyance, and so it works great for flood conveyance. What it doesn't work good for is protecting water quality, and so when you're talking about Santa Monica Bay or other resources downstream, you basically create a nice efficient chute to pollute the heck out of the waterway, which doesn't do so well for the economy. And so in terms of, is it working in Phoenix, and I'm trying to break out your question because there's a number of things that you raised there. You raised also the use of water. So actually in Phoenix, I don't know if you've noticed this, but in about a month ago, and some of you others may have seen this, they have now stopped to issue development permits because there's no more water. So the groundwater, they ran out of groundwater that they could allocate. which basically means there's still water there. They still can use it, but they are now starting to get to the point where all the groundwater is allocated, meaning that they are stopping development unless they have another source of water. Now, there's still surface water coming in, so they'll still continue to develop, but they're being constrained more than they were in the past.
Yeah, because we heard something on the news about there was an area, a development that they allowed, to be built, which had no source of water after they, this next community said, you can no longer use our water.
Yeah. And so they're running into those type of situations in the West. Before I came here, I was in Utah. I worked for 18 years at the University of Utah, and so I lived in a very dry place where, the 100-year event, 100-year return period event here is like all that you get in 1 year there. It's remarkable dryness. But these type of things, oh, yes?
Would they create a channel in the restoration?
Okay, now we're back to, I was going to get us back focused, and you've done it for us. So what can you do for this type of thing? You could think about creating what?
A concrete channel.
Some sort of smaller channel within here that you can then work and create because you need to serve two purposes. You still need to convey all that water. That water is not going to be able to go anywhere else. All of this water, where's this water coming from?
It's the mountains.
Rainwater runoff.
No, it's dry. It's dry.
I guess the dam somewhere.
No. What happens in cities? What do people do in cities, in LA?
They flush their toilets.
Flush the toilets, but doesn't go here, thank goodness. But not, maybe some of it does, yeah.
Like your bath water and all that stuff?
Nope, that still goes to the sanitary sewer, and so that's, but there's no storms, so where's the water coming from? It's dry in LA at this time. Water in the grass. This is 90% of this water is coming from just overflow of irrigation water. So the stream is an interesting man-made activity. It's basically all irrigation water. Now there would be a smaller amount of water flowing down in it that would be naturally occurring coming from upstream sources, but it wouldn't be as big as this. About 10% of the water in there is from natural sources. The rest is from nuisance flow or overflow from irrigation and other types of things, sewers that have been connected that are not supposed to be there, stuff like that.
That got my brain flowing. So would you see less frequent floods here because when it's raining, people don't water their lawns and whatnot? So if the main source of water for this is people watering their lawns, does it kind of counteract the rare precipitation event?
What it creates is from an annual basis, a long-term basis, differences in what you would get at the downstream end. So what's going into something like Santa Monica Bay? This is so small, this flow, compared to a flood flow, that it's not only is it progressing at it's slow. It's very slow flow.
What about the chemistry of the water after it goes through all those fertilized lawns?
So that's a good, because that's actually what when we were working on this project in LA, we were out there trying to understand the chemical characteristics, the quality, the water quality, so that we could then understand if we put some vegetation in here and we put wildlife, fish, there was a lot of wild ideas that people were coming to, the communities were coming up, well, let's stock it with salmon. Things that were really quite fun and feasible. You could do it. But you had to see what's the chemical quality of this water. Could you actually do anything? And would you want to have someone walking along it, or are they going to get contaminated with some kind of disease? And then, that's of course totally the opposite effect of what you'd want. The chemical quality of the water, as you would expect, has certain things like fertilizers, pesticides. Those are all toxic organic chemicals associated with it. They get concentrated in here. You also have a lot of bacteria, because I think as used the gentleman back there in the jacket said there's sewers or there's flushing of toilets. Some of that water gets in here, and so you do have bacteria. You have different types of fecal coliforms, and you have wildlife and so on. So the water is relatively dirty. It looks nice, but it's relatively dirty.
Nitrogen too from fertilizer.
Yep.
From fertilizing your lawn.
Yep, and you see, oh, there it is. You see the this along the side. There's a lot of it's nutrient rich, which of course, and that was the problem that they were trying to prevent. Is that Santa Monica Bay was slowly eutrophying and becoming a problem for all the beaches they have there, and so they were trying to come up with solutions that would capture and retain those nutrients as it's going downstream. And so the idea was very similar to what you had suggested. So we're going to give you the engineering salute for that one. That was a good idea, is to go ahead and put something that can go in the middle. Now this isn't the exact location of it. This is a little bit downstream, but what they said was, we can only modify so much of this. As the flood control district there said, you know, what are you got to make your choices. You're either going to flood out the city, or you're going to build like $5 billion worth of underground storage, or you are going to leave this. Because this is the only way we can get rid of all the floodwaters that hit the city. And as you saw last spring, this spring in California, they had all these flooding from the big series of storms that they got. And so they need this conveyance capacity. So the best thing they could do was to develop the downstream area. So this is about 4 or 5 miles downstream from where this is at. This is where it's drained. This used to look exactly like this. It went out to Santa Monica Bay exactly like this. They restored it to look like this, so all of this was wetland areas that was designed to remove all the nutrients, capture the pollutants and other things before it went out to the nice Santa Monica Bay. The one thing that it couldn't do was remove the bacteria. And so they still have beach closures and other things that happen in there after a rainstorm wet weather event. Okay, let's see, let's continue on. Creek within a creek, there we go. That's the engineer of the day over there, nice idea. Okay, stream channel restoration. So now, is it enough to restore this stream? Or what other problems do you see lying along that stream?
I guess, you know, what we talked about earlier, you know, flooding, development, that type of thing.
More concrete there. So you have to worry about I heard it. Runoff. Very good. That was, you said it earlier, and I was like, I'm going to get him later on. He got the answer. He's waiting to say it's runoff, stormwater runs. So you have to worry about, not only can you not just open things up, so we're reversing that urban stream life cycle. We're opening it up, we daylight it. We have to restore it in some way. We have to come up with a solution there, and then we have to now turn our attention to the runoff. So how do we handle the runoff? We first have to worry about the riparian corridor and the transition zone. There's both flood management characteristics associated with that riparian corridor, and generally the riparian corridor would be, you know, you take the average high water, you take the average high water level and a stream, and you go about 100 feet from that to either side, and that would be what you consider your corridor. If you can go that distance, then you're going to be able to have flood control characteristics or flood avoidance needs, as well as water quality protection. There's a buffer there for that. And so if you're in here, then you're in risk for certain things, but you're at least far enough away to provide some benefits from that riparian corridor. And so establishing that corridor is the first thing that you would want to do. Looking back on this picture, you can see that that's very difficult to do in practice, because land developers and us, we want to get as close to that creek as much as we can. We want to love that creek. We want to, of course, make a profit loving that creek, but we also want to get right next to the creek. And so there's always this constant battle of what is that riparian corridor, how close can we get to the creek? But generally speaking, the optimal from an engineering standpoint would be providing about 100 feet from that creek edge, the high water level, outward on either distance, to be able to have that protection for water quality and flood prevention. Now there is the FEMA maps that would go out even further for really, really, really big rare events. They would go out much further than that. But in terms of being able to provide flood conveyance capacity, it would be within that 100-foot range. There's all types of functions that happen. I mentioned the flooding, water quality, and vegetation, and aesthetics, and recreation, and walking along, and all these types of things that are happening in the riparian corridor. So it can be built and designed to provide all these types of functions, as well as protecting the stream. The key thing that I think you'll see in a lot of these is you got to, and I was getting to this, and we're going to the reversal of the urban stream life cycle, is you have to package a local, then think of the going beyond what you're doing for the little part and considering that, and then going a little bit further even than that, so whole systems level or back to this watershed definition level. So the last little thing that I want to talk about and hold this up, and I think we already know who's going to give us the answer to this. So in addition to daylighting and restoring the streams, what is the third critical element we need? We need some stormwater management. And that is dealing with these type of storm drains that are feeding into the creek. If we could address that last problem, then we're in good shape for being able to have a healthy functioning water system within cities. Okay, here's one of the last questions I got as we come near to the conclusion of what I've got for you this morning. There's two types of ways to drain a city. I mentioned it earlier and had an abbreviation. What was it? Who's taking notes? CS, not CSI, that's a fun show. CSO, and it stood for?
It's good for sewer overflow.
Combined sewer overflow. And so combined sewers are one kind of drainage system in a city. What's the other kind? If you have combined, what's the opposite of combined?
Singular.
Or another S word? If you don't combine it, they're separate. We're making engineers out of everyone here. You got the combined sewer system and you got the separate sewer system. So this is drainage engineering 101. You know, you got the combined sewer system, the separate sewer system. The combined sewer system takes everything from the sanitary side and the storm drain side. So it's the flushing of the toilets, it is the tubs and showers, it's the storm water coming off the streets, all going into one pipe. Big pipe. And then in a separate system, you don't combine the storm water with the sanitary water. And there's various positives and negatives associated with which one you would put in which place, but it has significant ramifications in terms of how you manage that and what the implications are for flood control and water quality control. During a storm event, so now we're on the wet weather side, this is where you see you'd have two systems functioning separately, and less water in the storm water, and it's not as dirty, it's still dirty, but not as dirty, and then you don't have this overwhelming flow and concentration going to the POTW. What's a POTW? Another engineering question.
Where you treat the sewer?
It's a treatment facility, yep. You treat the sewer, it's called a publicly owned treatment works. POTW, publicly owned treatment works. So that's what treats all your sewage is those POTWs. And you can see here, they show this combined sewage and stormwater. What's happening there?
They're treating it.
They're not treating it at all. No, here's going to the POTW this way. So during dry weather, it's great. It goes to the POTW, they treat it and they manage it. But during a wet weather event, they will have what they call overflows. That's the CSO, the overflows. So too much water, more flooding events. Back, remember, 27% going forward, higher flood scale events, 27% more overflows that will happen from combined sewer systems in that case. And so all these types of problems are associated with these two different types. The grand solution for both kinds that have emerged is, I'm not going to even do this, I'm going to say what is the solution for this for both types of sewer systems is green infrastructure, and specifically green stormwater infrastructure. These are also called low impact development practices, and you may know, how many live in the Tuscaloosa area? We got a lot of Tuscaloosa. How many live in Birmingham? Okay, no one likes Birmingham, that's interesting. So Tuscaloosa is actually a leader in this area for putting in these type of stormwater practices. Now we get a lot of rain here, and we want to be able to prevent floods, protect the water quality of those creeks that not many of us know about, but also the Black Warrior River. There's things like that we're trying to do, and this is the way to do it. It's green stormwater infrastructure, also called low impact development practices. Tuscaloosa has, I think, over 200 or 300 permitted low impact development practice sites in the city limits. So a lot of this type of green infrastructure is in Tuscaloosa. Let's go through them and see how many recognize things like this. So the first one is called a rain garden or bioretention. So this is like you're probably familiar with the big detention basins that you see in different places that are storing stormwater, protecting stormwater. There's a big fun one being built out in Sokol Park right now. If you go out to the Sokol Park, they got a big construction project over there. It's a nice big hole in the ground. But this is a smaller version of those big detention basins. So it's a smaller place to store the stormwater. And by design, you're trying to give it not only flood retention capacity, put water into the ground for groundwater replenishment, but also taking out pollutants from settling and from biological and chemical processes to reduce the pollution. So these are engineered structures that you will see, and you'll notice these all the time now. Now when you go to the shopping store and you look over and you'll say, oh, I'm parking there. Oh, there's some green infrastructure. I learned all about that. Mm-hmm. So you're going to be able to recognize these things as you go around town because there's hundreds of them out there. They're meant to be, just invisible to the normal person. Even myself, I kind of sometimes don't realize. I'm like, oops, there it is right in front of me. Zach.
Do you know if that's the reason for the weird roundabouts on Queen City Avenue?
Weird roundabouts on Queen City Avenue. I know what you're talking about. I don't know. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, it's kind of like, it's not really a roundabout? Is it a roundabout? And you all get there and you kind of like, well, what do I do? Yeah, I know. Yeah, I don't know if it is. I don't think so.
It was set up to slow traffic
Yep.
by certain residents in the area got to push through the city council.
And so this is the slowing traffic is an engineering, and the other civil engineering side of the house, civil engineering has multiple sides of the house. One of it is traffic engineering. That's a practice of slowing traffic calming measures. The water side, we have green infrastructure. So what we often do is we collaborate and come together and we say, we're going to make these traffic calming areas green infrastructure for stormwater purposes. That did not happen, I don't think. When I've driven by those, I've looked at them, it seems like they're raised up. So the telltale sign of green infrastructure is it's going to be a depressed area inside of those curbs, and you'll have little cuts in the curb that are letting water get into there. And it's not like skateboarding features or something to let people have fun. It's for stormwater management. That's a rain garden. The big question with all these things is like once you start doing them, it's like, well, who maintains them? Who takes care of them? Who does all that stuff? Because it's job creation, as we heard back there. If you put things like this in, you have to be able to maintain them. The permeable pavement is the other one. So this is a common practice that you'll see, and you cannot really tell a difference unless you dump a big bucket of water on them. The water will go right through the pavement. It's more expensive. It doesn't last as long, but it has the purposes of being able to let water go through it. Very common in different parts of the country where you get less rain. Out in the western part of the U.S., it's more common. You do see it here as well, but it can't handle the very, very large storms because there's only so much capacity. So it ends up behaving like regular pavement after a while. But groundwater contamination in these type of cases is an issue because it's just going straight through, no treatment at all. These type of practices will help to remove pollution using the plants and other filter media as removal practices. You can retrofit this as an engineering structure to be water quality treatment though. Green roofs. So you probably have all seen green roofs. You may not have realized they're aesthetic architectural features, but also again with that collaboration, they can also serve as stormwater management. You just design it a little bit differently to store a little bit of water and release it at a rate. You provide filtering capacity and other types of things that will help to remove the pollution. Also, store enough water to reduce floods. Very big practices in cities like New York, Chicago are two big ones where green roofs are very popular for preventing combined sewer overflows. So the combined sewer overflow prevention industry is billions of dollars. Usually cities invest hundreds of millions or billions of dollars in their green infrastructure to be able to prevent combined sewer overflows. And in those type of places where they don't have a lot of space, green roofs are very common. The problem is if we create a little yard on top of our building and we do a lot of fertilizer and pesticides and nutrients and other things, then we create a pollution source instead of a pollution sink. Rainwater harvesting is another interesting one, and in the West, again, this is popular but also controversial. Here, there's not as much of a controversy about it because there's no worry about who's got the water downstream, but down in the west, it's like if you capture the water in New Mexico or Utah or a place like that, you're taking someone else's water and you can have a fight on your hands. Here, not much of a problem. It's like, thank you so much, and we'll do it. But this is another way to be able to meet some stormwater management needs. There is potential for this, going back to our original discussion about climate change. The green stormwater infrastructure, if you put all these practices in, they will be able to prevent that 27% increase of heavy storm events, as well as the increase in overall precipitation, which is an increase in pollutant loading from the perspective of stormwater management. You can be able to capture and manage most of the stormwater increases you would see from climate change. So it's a solution that can work. So there was a CIROH mention. And so, Richard, I'm going to get to that question. What's CIROH or a CIROH? So does anyone know a CIROH? This is my big finish here with CIROH. Who knows about CIROH? No one. Zach, that's the world of water. We don't know watersheds. We don't know hydrographs.
We discussed it quickly week one.
Okay. No, yeah, I'm sure. This must be the advanced version of the world of water, because of the hydrographs and watersheds and stuff like that. So the Cooperative Institute is something that was formed at the University of Alabama last year from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. They established a Cooperative Institute here to be able to connect to the NOAA facility, the National Water Center that's on campus, and the USGS that's on campus. And so CIROH is providing research and education support to those federal entities to be able to translate research from a consortium of universities across the U.S. to be able to support NOAA and the USGS. A couple things about it, we do a wide range of different types of work related to things I've been talking about. We're mostly looking for CIROH at flood forecasting and drought forecasting and water quality forecasting, so mostly the warning, but also we're using it for building engineering solutions. And so if you're trying to look at modeling frameworks to analyze, well, how big do you need to make these things? How many of these things need to be put in? Where do we put them? That's all types of things that we're doing. And here's a cool project from one of our researchers where he's actually looking at these types of green infrastructure systems, these wetland systems in coastal areas, and working with stakeholders down there to try to evaluate which ones are going to work to be able to combat all of the challenge they're facing in urban areas and coastal areas, which is a compounded effect because you have things like hurricanes and sea level rise and the changes in precipitation all causing many problems in terms of managing water in cities and coasts. And so there is a chance to use green infrastructure and reverse the urban stream life cycle in coastal areas. And this project is working on trying to analyze that.
You still haven't answered my question.
What is CIROH?
CIROH mean?
Cooperative Institute for Research to Operations in Hydrology. Okay?
Boy, that's obvious, isn't it?
It's like everyone's on the tip of everyone's tongue, doesn't it? So basically, Cooperative Institute is, NOAA has 16 of these around the country, and they basically are big institutes for doing a research. You know, we're all our pointy heads are in there doing our research stuff, but it also is it's a connection between operational facilities where they're doing prediction and the cooperation with researchers. So we're bringing those two groups together to try to make sure the research is useful. And so we're publishing papers, which is what we do, but we're also really developing solutions that go into, we're writing a lot of computer codes, creating data sets and stuff like that for operational hydrology. Thank you so much for reminding me of that question and taking care of it. I should have actually seen if anyone could guess what it was. That would have been the last big mug we would have given out. Two mugs.
Yeah.
So we've got the big finish here. The big message underlying behind all of this, if you're talking about the urban stream life cycle and all of this, is the famous quote from John Muir: when we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the city. And so as soon as we start changing something in an urban stream and how we manage it, it's hooked to everything else, and you're like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize it was connected to that. And that's what makes urban water engineering so much fun. Everything is interconnected, and it's really complicated.
Ecology.
What's that?
It used to be called ecology.
It is, and there actually is a whole field of urban stream ecology that focuses on these type of things and tries to think of how those interconnections. Urban ecology is a umbrella field above that deals with urban systems and how there's all these interconnections, and so that's exactly what it's called, is urban ecology. Very good. So with that, I'm going to close out and say this is all the things we covered. We should know now, remember, the urban stream life cycle and urban stream syndrome. We understand those things, and we know a lot about urban green infrastructure, and we all have our engineering hats on us for how we can design and plan those things.
Right.
So been wonderful being with you all. Thank you so much. And